snowing nicely. It's about time. Let's have a game of 8-bit Slick. A bit of training first. Yeah, let's race. Victory! So this video is not about the 8-bit hub, 8-bit Slick, the racing game, or the Cumanary board. It is actually about joysticks on the Oric. And I started by that one because it has 3 joysticks and I happen to have it. If you were one of the people in the 80s who had an Oric Atmos or an Oric one, there was no way to plug your joystick on the Oric because there were no actual joystick port. This was later fixed with the Telestrat, which happens to have a joystick port on the right side and one on the left side. One is only supporting the joystick, and the other one can be used for the Telestrat mouse. This machine is only relevant because some new expansion board, the Twilight card, there, is compatible with the Telestrat. So anyway, there's been a bunch of people releasing some new Oric expansion boards recently, so I decided it was time to support joysticks in the OSDK. Originally, the joystick port, so the famous DB9, which is actually DE9, come from the Atari VCS 2600, and in particular the CX40 joystick. Not very comfortable, but supported 4 directions on 1 fire button, so it became quite fast a standard. Out of these 9 pins, most of the Oric interface support only these ones, so the 4 directions, the fire button, and the ground. But other computers have been using the additional pins for other peripherals. Like, for example, the Atari XL/XE range of machine, which also has this connector, which you could use for the Atari Touch tablet, paddles, light gun, and things like that, which was using these additional signals, including the 5-volt power. But yeah, that's what is supported on the Oric. Since there were no connector on the machine, there have been a bunch of interface which have been built in France, in UK, probably some in Germany. And you have 2 main categories. You have the one that connect on the expansion bus, and the one that connect on the printer port. Most of the expansion that connect to the expansion bus faster to access because they expose directly some register in memory, or they emulate key presses. You need to program them to say up goes to desk key, down goes to desk key, etc., which is not very practical. On the one which have registers need custom code, and most of them were not supported because they were quite rare. But the biggest drawback is that if you use the expansion port, it means you can't plug Erebus, for example, or you can plug microdisk or Cumulus, because most of the time they don't have a second connector, so it's a problem. Most of the interface were on the parallel port, and the most common is that one. This is a PASE, and it just connects there. You have 2 connectors, and yeah, it works. That one is a EJK, which you can see is very similar. It's different design, but they also plug on the same connector. And you also have two joystick connectors. And these 2 ones are also EJK, but much more recent. That one is what's called the Stingy joystick interface, and that one is the Egoist. which is a nifty little piece of hardware, which plugs directly on the back of the Oric. And then you can just plug your joystick on it. And finally, here we have the OPEL interface, which is this horrible looking thingy, which looks like it's been glued together and painted with a Hammerite paint, which comes with two tapes, the slalom ski game, the joystick controller, and the picture designer. That one has been considered as the official Oric interface, but there are not actually that many people having it, and there are almost no game at all supporting that, mostly because the software that comes with it, the driver, is very, very unpractical. Basically, what that means is that you had to load the software for the OPEL, set the control and direction you wanted to use, then load the game. And if you had to reset the Oric, you will have to redo it again because it was stored in memory and not in the interface. And among the programmable expansion bus interface, you have the Dk'tronics, Protek, Downsway, Master Paddle. Like the Protek and the Downsway, you have a switch on them, and you enable the program mode, and then you can put your joystick, move up, press a key, press fire, press another key, and then that's how you program them. Then there is that one, the ECSI expansion board, which was made in France, which I had back in the days. And what they did was basically to replicate the Oric keyboard matrix on the expansion board, and you have, like on the old phone terminals, could connect the 5 connectors to say, I want to use this key, this key, this key, this key. And basically what it is was just to simulate the key presses directly, because what this interface do is to actually spy on the hardware inside, and pretend that they are a key when they detect an access to the keyboard matrix. But as you can see, it's quite wide. It has a connector for the printer port, expansion port, additional expansion. It was quite a large board, about as large as the computer itself, but on the side, totally unpractical. So what I did is that I did this terrible hack, which many people hate because they said that I modified the computer. Basically, I added a joystick port on the back of the Oric, soldered directly on the keyboard matrix. And to do that, I had to remove the UHF modulator, which does not work on French computers anyway, because it's in a British standard. And then to finish, we have the 8-bit hub that I was showing in the intro. So this thing uses a special cable. The hub is compatible with multiple computers. Right now it only works on the Oric and on the Lynx, but technically it should be working on the Commodore, Atari, and on Apple II. And this universal port connects to the Oric printer port, and then you can use these as a joystick interface. And as you saw in the intro, you can play on 8-bit Slicks and the other 8-bit Unity games. In theory, is going to be able to make a firmware update which will add the support for PASE interface. And so it should be transparent, working out of the box like if it was this interface. Which is a problem, because PASE has a big problem. Between this and this, so they connect on the same port, but the problem is the printer port is not only used for the printer, it's connected to the VIA, the Versatile Interface Adapter, which itself also is connected to access the keyboard, but also the sound chip. This thing never disconnects the wire, so when you have the joystick in a direction or press a button, that actually make a connection between the wire on the ground, which is detected by the machine as being high or low. And the problem is that it happens for as long as the connection is enabled. And as a result, if your program is trying to play music, it will have to access a specific register on the sound chip and put a specific value. And this thing, because it never cut the circuit, basically forces some of the lines to 1. And when you think that you were sending some specific value, it's actually sending some specific value which has a bit forced to 1, depending on the direction. And the result is that it totally destroys the sound. So, just want to show you that the interface is working fine. And if I replace by the OPEL, the PASE, sorry, it's also working quite well. Then, music demo. First with the PASE. Bubble bubble. Great Giant Sisters. And as you notice, it's the same thing with port A and B. Now, if we put back the IJK interface, so no problem whatsoever with the Stingy version. Same thing with the ESS Egoist version. It's all work fine. And that one was a big unknown. It's the OPEL joystick interface, and when I tried, it actually worked perfectly, no sound corruption at all. So there you go. That one is to be avoided. And unfortunately, most games were designed to work with that one. But it's not a problem anymore, because since all this interface has been recently remade, and it's trivial to make your own, and games are being patched, so the new standard is actually IJK. Which brings the question of the 8-bit hub. By default, right now, these things are supposed to be PASE compatible. It's not actually working, but Anthony said that it will be working in a future patch soon. But it means that it's going to behave like that one, while what we really want is something that behaves like that one. So hopefully it's going to be able to modify the firmware of the hub so it behaves as a IJK interface, or maybe even an OPEL. But IJK will be better because it means all the games will work out of the box. That being said, you can make some funky special effect with that one. I have no idea how it sounds on a 4-bit sample. Going to be interesting. Wow, sounds like volume control. So, why is it not happening on the IJK or Stingy? It's because the design is very smart. And we have an explanation on the RetroWiki forum. Here we have basically the diagrams for the interface. What they did is that this component here is just a bunch of transistors, and by default they are in open position, so all the connections to all the pins are actually cut. And when you try to read the joystick, you enable one of the pin, the strobe signal, which, by some magic involving some capacitors, actually power all these transistors, which suddenly get closed. So during the time you are reading the interface, you actually close the contact, you can read the position of the joystick, and as soon as you are done, you disable the strobe, and poof, magic, there is no more connection, and it just works. I'm not quite sure how the Stingy achieves that. It's basically just a bunch of diodes, and it managed to achieve the same result. The main difference between that one and that one is that this one can be set as port A or port B, while that one does not have the way to separate, to distinguish. It's just a bunch of cables, so it will appear as active on both the port A and port B, which I guess is not really a problem since it's a single player connector anyway. So yeah, people have been going through all these interfaces to see how they were working, and they've been rebuilding their own. And here is the code to access this. So need to enable the strobe, etc. So all these programming things were actually on the Defense Force wiki, where we have the drivers for a bunch of interface. Yeah, so LTE, commonly mistaken for a PASE interface, was the most common joystick interface and supported in many games. However, it affected sound badly as it acted directly on the parallel port. But yeah, it behaved like the PASE interface. For the OPEL driver, we found out that we did not have to use the software that came with it, and it's actually possible to access directly. I added the support for that in the OSDK. So I provide a simple API, which have joystick type select, where you specify if you want to use keyboard, IJK, PASE, Telestrat, OPEL, and Dk'tronics. And you just need to have this callback called 50 times per second, so you can do that with chain IRQ handler. And when this is done, OSDK joystick 0 and joystick 1 contains the status of the joystick based on what you selected. And here we have the implementation with the various dispatcher for the various routines. So this is the code for Dk'tronics, that's the simplest. You just got the value in 310 and 320 with up, down, fire, left, right. And we do a small conversion, so they are all accessible the same way by testing right, left, fire, down, up, which we picked up the IJK standard because it was the most commonly used these days. The OPEL interface, something similar, with the conversion tables to remap the bits, because they are not in the same order. PASE interface, something similar, with a slightly longer table, and the code for IJK. The Telestrat code works more or less like the Dk'tronics, but it's using the Telestrat VIA port 2. This is a mousepad website where you can see it has a Protek in original box on the master paddle. I'm going to ask him documentation because I actually never seen that one and I don't even know how it works. It does not seem to have a switch to program it. Here we have some old discussion from 16 years ago about which is the best joystick interface for the Oric. If you're interested about the details and the history, you can read about the origin of the Atari joystick port, which came with VCS 2600, description of the 640, this array, which is important, which indicates what's mapped to what, the various pin on the connector. As you can see, most everybody agreed on up, down, left, right. Bad things start to happen when it's about buttons, where not everybody was agreeing. Ground is not always at the same position, which can be very dangerous. And here, for example, where everybody has VCC plus 5 volt, on the Amstrad CPC it's a button 1. I'm not sure why, that does not look like a very, very smart idea. But well, anyway, that's what they did. And emulation. Most people these days don't have real hardware, so the question is how can you use real joystick when you play with the emulator? It is actually possible with Oriclopedia. It's not possible with the Oric, because the Oric is an old DOS application, and it only supports some virtual joystick using the numpad. But for Oriclopedia, it's just a matter of enabling whatever joystick interface you want, like non-Atari PASE or IJK. I recommend IJK. And then how you want to access it. And you can use keyboard emulation, or you can use actual USB joystick, as long as they are recognized by SDL. So this is the program you're going to have with OSDK next version, where the two joysticks are detected. Up, left, right, diagonal, and down, which stays stuck, because this is Oriclopedia 1.2. This has been fixed in Oriclopedia 1.3, actually in some intermediate version, which is going to be released sometime in the beginning of the year. But you need to set up the proper interface. All these have been tested on the real hardware by 2-3 people, and I'm waiting for Steve to tell me if the Dk'tronics implementation is working. To be fair, it's just for a proof of concept on just saying that we are handling it. I'm not sure there are many people which are going to make a Dk'tronics game, but if you're making a game using the OSDK, or if you steal the joystick S file, you will have the thing available, so why not doing it? I mean, if you are going to select between EJK, PASE and keyboard, it does not hurt anything to add the different other interface. And it would be cool if people could actually start using their old OPEL or Dk'tronics interface that they never used before. So yeah, it would be nice to have some feedback on that. And yes, some special thanks to all the people here who helped. Simon, who helped extracting the OPEL software. Steve, who tried things. Higashi, who sent me this interface, and ESS, who gave me that one. Dom, who made the Shoot Again series of articles that allowed us to actually know how to hack the games. Many people have been doing patches, so we should have a few collection of game compatible EJK being releasing soon. Shema for testing Blake 7 is going to be possible to play with a joystick. Salice for all his work on the Spanish thing. Muspad for using all this picture on Wikipedia, where I use the rest. And at the end of the page, so the link is going to be in the description, you can find the Steve Marshall website, where he describes all the things with a user manual of the various interfaces and with pictures, so it's interesting. Here is the Egopad. ESS joypad that goes with the Egoist, which exists in black, red and white, to match the color of your Oric 1 or Atmos, as we can see here. So the Egopad, which is basically a pad with two connectors, so you can use it as left-handed or right-handed. And you have some small dip switch you can use to also swap the direction. So if you want to play a flight simulator when pressing up makes you go down, with that one you can. So these ones are the competition pro clones called the Super Professional Joystick. And that one is an actual competition pro. And the difference is in the type of switches. This is a good old Konix Speed King, and this is the arcade, which is also microchips based. And I think that's all for today.